So in the community pharmacy, uh, uh, among all the pharmacists who work in different areas, these community pharmacists are at the forefront because they are really the most accessible healthcare professionals. Any person wants to has a minor ailment, he just goes to the pharmacist and buys medications and asks him, I have a stomach ache or I have a headache, and can you give me a medication. So, and they are in the front line of public health because they serve as direct point of access for patients. And also the pharmacies, community pharmacies provide essential public service to the whole of the population by supplying medicines and providing pharmaceutical care, and also ensuring the continuity of these essential services even during the lockdown period. So if you see the various kind of um, services that uh, community pharmacists have been providing, the first is that because accessibility to healthcare professionals was decreased, again, especially during the lockdown period, there were long appointments, and many hospitals didn't have these telehealth services. Especially in India, we don't have that. And so because the pharmacists, they allowed the essential services to be run and pharmacies to be open, they were more accessible to the patients, and they were the first point of contact for many patients. Okay. And so in this way they could clarify there any misconceptions. Okay, do I have just a cold or a headache? Do I have COVID? And those kind of things. So many the public usually have a lot of misconceptions because they'll be reading newspapers and watching news, and they'll be believing everything that they hear. So it's a very important job of the pharmacist to clarify misconceptions. And maybe not in India, but elsewhere in the world, pharmacists were empowered to screen patients for COVID. So you have those typical symptoms of COVID, and you approach the pharmacist. Then they had those kits, and also PPEs were given to them, and they had actually screened the patients for COVID-19. And also, like I was telling, providing minor ailment consultations, they could actually provide these kind of services by giving them some kind of advice regarding minor ailments like cough, cold, headaches, or abdominal pain or diarrhea. And even for patients who had long term conditions like hypertension and diabetes, and they had to visit the pharmacy for their medications or anything, so they could do all these services. They could provide by asking them how their BP, or measure their BP actually, and encourage them to go for a self management of blood glucose, and then ensure that they are taking their medications properly. So all these kind of services were provided by the community pharmacist. And in Europe and in USA, because there are certain cities where there are not much movement could be possible. Many pharmacists have provided telehealth services, and even if they did not have, they made the public aware of such kind of services that are provided by the hospitals also, and by many doctors who run clinics. And especially renewing of prescriptions. So in India, like, you don't have any law which prevents a pharmacist from giving renewing prescriptions if the date is not renewed. But in other countries, until and unless the doctor mentions, the patient has seen the doctor and again he prescribes another for another month or something, then only he can prescribe. But during the lockdown period, pharmacists were empowered to refill prescriptions. So, and they allowed the patients to take the medications even without visiting their doctor, because these these are important medications and required for them to keep their um, disease under control. So some of the I'll stress on the community pharmacist roles because it has been proven, and elsewhere across the world during this lockdown period, they were the ones who actually uh, stood in the front line, because people who were getting admitted to the hospital were fewer. I mean, and apart from COVID-19 patients, other than that who were getting admitted to the hospital was less. But it was a community pharmacist who played the role of even a doctor during this lockdown period. And so some of the activities that were performed by community pharmacists during this COVID-19 pandemic was some measures to reduce the health risks posed by the pandemic, and providing reliable and factual information on the disease and associated symptoms. And they were also involved in educating the public in infection control and preventive measures to reduce the transmissions, like telling them about hand hygiene, social distancing, and isolating yourself if you feel that you have some of the symptoms. So just go give it for the test and then isolate yourself until the test results come. And also implementing infection control measures like cleaning and disinfecting the pharmacy environment, and also limiting public access to the pharmacy. And some of the pharmacists had to make some extra arrangements to make them stand in a line, and separate them again, uh, draw squares outside the pharmacy so that patients follow that. And generally informing the public about the uh, precautions to be taken, and also the preparedness of the pharmacist. So to maintain continuous pharmacy services, including providing essential medications and other products. There was a severe shortage at that time. Everyone wanted hand sanitizers, everyone wanted protective masks. So obtaining and then trying to assess what is the demand for that, and then keeping that much of this thing and ensuring that there's a continuous supply, and especially for these essential medications and medications for chronic diseases. So we had also conducted a webinar for on community pharmacist perspective during the COVID-19, and we had invited pharmacists from across the world and who spoke, and all of them said that the main problem that they faced was there was not just enough drugs or sanitizers or protective masks or even PPEs. Okay, so in the beginning, so then they had to go do all the other things, and they had to ensure that they are prepared to meet the demands. And they also took part in assisting the local and national management teams in ensuring a coordinated health service response. So if they were in a district, all the pharmacists in the district got together, and they gave a number, that is, we require these many uh, drugs or these many PPEs or any such kind of things, and that's how they uh, uh, became more prepared. Okay. And also if there were any advisories that were released from public health agencies and even some regulatory bodies, they had to be up to date about that, and they had to inform the patients also about that. So this was a very important action by the community pharmacists that was taken, and this was a very proactive thing that was done by all the community pharmacists. And the way they responded, so there was all these actions were immediate in response to the pandemic. And also pharmacists were they had the opportunity to refer the patient if they had any suspected case. So you go to this hospital, get yourself tested, or you get yourself admitted, because this is definitely looks like COVID-19, especially if the patient had come into contact with another person who had COVID-19. And also facilitate this continuous supply of both over the counter as well as prescription medications to patients, especially emergency supply of repeat medications whenever necessary. So all this had to be done with a lot of coordination with the hospital authorities, as well as with the district health authorities, as well as with some governmental agencies. And they were also assisting in dealing with any supply shortages. So so they had to take permissions earlier to give a substitute. So normally you're not supposed to give a substitute, but if for some reason there's a shortage of some drug, then give us some therapeutic alternative. And also some of the pharmacies were also preparing their own alcohol based hand sanitizer formulations, and they were dispensing it to the public. So, in any kind of disaster management, especially in these kind of infectious disasters, the community pharmacist's main responsibility will be storing, appropriate stocks of these pharmaceutical products and devices, that is medicines, masks, PPEs, etc. And also informing and educating the public is a very important um, responsibility of a community pharmacist, because many pharmacists, especially from Goa and other places, they had they said that the public do not know anything, and they used to come rush to the pharmacy and not follow say social distancing, and take too many of the things, because it's a lockdown period, they were not buying, so panic buying, so all those kinds of things were being done by the patients, and it was a pharmacist's duty to reassure them and tell them that this is not going to be a permanent thing. I mean, you just go for a month supply and then come back later for that. Okay. And then counseling about the medications and about this condition and how to keep oneself safe, especially if they were already taking immunosuppressants, especially for rheumatoid arthritis or transplantation patients who need to be on immunosuppressants for a long time. Counseling them about not missing their doctor visits, and also continuing to take their medications, as well as preventing themselves from getting exposed to the infection, and also appropriately referring the patients towards the doctor or the hospital, and prepare and make pamphlets which will educate the patient about preventing the disease prevention, and also promote the control of infection. So hand washing technique was also told to them, availability of face masks and instructions for their proper use, how to dispose the masks, and ensuring stock is always there, and key medicines, especially essential medicines, as well as equipment and facilities. And also they had been authorized, community pharmacists had been authorized to repeat dispensing of prescribed medicines for patients with long-term conditions. And then wherever possible, some of the pharmacists have performed telehealth and telemedicine. And triad service, that is emergency services. So in hospitals, in smaller cities where there were fewer hospitals, and there were fewer emergency services, pharmacists have also stepped forward and performed this triad service, that is given triad service. But they had to take permission from the regulatory authority before they could do that. This has happened in other countries, but not in India. So you could see patients and reduce the burden on other healthcare like hospitals or doctors, because the doctors were overworked, as well as the nurses and other healthcare professionals also. So in such cases, pharmacists have stepped forward and performed the emergency services also. And there have been stories of pharmacists delivering medicines to their home, especially elderly people who could not come, and they were forbidden from even leaving their houses. So so in such cases they were allowing for telephone services, and then one person used to go and deliver the medications, and even video based consultations were also provided by community pharmacists during the period. So, how do you manage this pharmaceutical supply in the time of COVID-19? So, most of the community pharmacists who we spoke to during the lockdown period, they said that they always had an alternative list of suppliers. for every drug. So you have to have a list of 3 to 4 suppliers, and if it was not available from one, you could always go to the next. But during this period, it happens that none of the suppliers were able to provide certain medications, because the manufacturers themselves did not were not producing those medications. So that was some of the drugs were really challenging to obtain. And also to strictly enforce rational use of medicines, that is, you ensure that you're giving the exact drug that is prescribed, and not give too much or too less. And only if it was if the drug was in shortage, then the pharmacist could limit the dispensing, and he could keep it for the other patients also, if he knew especially that there are other patients in the area who also take the same medications. And also pharmacists had prepared a list of substitute drugs which could be given in case this drug was not available. And they are contacting the patient's doctors and then telling that this is not available, so this is the one which had to be given. Is it okay, and getting their confirmation. So all those kinds of services have been provided by pharmacists during the uh, COVID-19 period. Then coming to the hospital pharmacists, so the role of the hospital pharmacist in a pandemic is usually being overlooked, because in a hospital, a doctor's role is like, uh, you know, mm, in the forefront. And even during the COVID-19 era, pharmacists have not stopped working, or they've not stopped going to the hospitals. And in fact, they have stepped up and they have taken on more responsibilities. In our hospital, even during the COVID-19 period, pharmacists were, practicing clinical pharmacists were coming to the hospital, providing whatever little services they could. And also one other thing that was there was, each and every pharmacist had to protect himself or herself also. So only in cases where it was absolutely necessary to go meet the patient, the pharmacist was going there and providing his services. And pharmacists have proven to be essential members of the healthcare team, and they are continuing to prove even during this era. Okay. So some of the services that hospital pharmacists provided during the um, COVID-19 period were, because they are being called as medication experts. The one main thing that even I did during the lockdown period was provide information on medication to the doctors. So we used to get a lot of calls from the doctors like, okay, so this COVID patient is there, he has all these comorbidities, and I don't know whether I should give him hydroxychloroquine, or should I give him some other drug. So we used to do a lot of literature search, and then provide some information on what would be the best choice of drug for the patient. And also in the hospital also we had severe drug shortages, and so we had to ensure that some substitutes were available. Especially there were some especially raw material which had to be purchased from China, so all those drugs were in serious shortage. And so in such cases we thought of some other class of drugs that could be used for the same um, uh, condition. And we had procured that medication, I mean the pharmacy had procured that medication for use by the patients. And also so we have antimicrobial audits in our hospital, but elsewhere in our other parts of the country we have antimicrobial stewardship program, where pharmacists were actually participating in these programs. So because of that they were able to develop local guidelines, like protocols for treatment of local infections, and also which antibiotic to be used for which infection, and if there were any co-infection, especially in COVID-19, if there is co-infection with a bacterial infection, then what kind of antibiotics to be used. So all those kind of protocols and guidelines have been developed by the pharmacists for use in the hospital. And again, in COVID-19 patients, because of comorbidities, there were a number of drugs that the patient was taking, and there could be a lot of problems, like drug interactions, or there was a better drug available, but that was not prescribed. So all those kinds of medication management, medication reviews, and other things were um, done by the pharmacist, and the most appropriate medication was actually delivered to the patient. And I mentioned before that many pharmacists in other hospitals also developed treatment protocols for certain diseases or conditions. In our hospital, during the COVID period, we had poisoning due to hand sanitizer, and so we had to develop poison treatment protocols for those kind of things which we had not faced before. So the strategies for pharmaceutical care is based on the severity of illness. You could decide what kind of service to be provided, and for medical workers, that is, you have to participate in the multidisciplinary consultation. So it was our communication with other healthcare professionals became tenfold during this period than before, because we needed information from them, and they needed a lot of information from us. So and also, since we were not actually participating in the ward rounds during that time, so there was this other kind of things like calling us up and asking us about the patient. So those kind of communication was common, and in that way we took part in multidisciplinary consultation, and also monitoring and reporting of adverse drug reactions. So earlier on, it was actually intensive monitoring. So at the patient's bedside, we used to talk to the patient and get any these things. But here, this during this period, we had only drop boxes. That is, if the nurse had any found any ADR, and she would have dropped it in the drop box, or if the doctor himself reported. And so developing individualized patient pharmaceutical care plans was also one of the important job services that clinical pharmacists provided during this period. And if whether the patient was a mild case of COVID-19 or a severe case, we had to pay attention to medication safety at all times. And especially in severe cases of COVID-19, there was increased importance given to prevent drug related effects or drug induced risks. And depending upon the patient population, again, if it was a confirmed case of COVID-19, so we had to again pay attention to medication safety. If it was a suspected case, we had to look into potential drug induced risk and also give psychological counseling. So because people who develop COVID and have gone through that phase, they are more confident than those who haven't got COVID but they have COVID like symptoms, and so they need a lot of psychological counseling. And also those people who have been in close contact with people who had COVID-19. And for the general public, we had to make them aware about this COVID-19 pandemic, and you had to disperse knowledge to them regarding the seriousness of the disease, and just simple precautions that a person needs to take to prevent from getting this disease. And also in some places, not in our setup, but the pharmacists have provided pharmaceutical care online also. So a study, a review was done actually to see what are all the different kinds of services that a pharmacist provided during the COVID-19, and some of them are really interesting. So apart from mask distributions, developing hygiene protocols, and also discarding unused drugs that were dispensed to COVID-19 patients. This was all a part of disease prevention and infection control activities that were performed, and also adequate storage and drug supply at the hospital pharmacies, and then developing drug formularies to guide the drug supply and purchase. And pharmacists also took part in conversion of IV to oral dosing wherever possible, and a virtual communication for supply inventory was done. Um, uh, for to buy inventory, people had to you use your virtual communication to buy your medications, and also in some hospitals, pharmacists also took part in virtual ward rounds, and also there was virtual medication consulting and counseling, and patient care and support for healthcare professionals, ensuring appropriate drug utilization for patients, reviewing online electronic orders, also providing medication reconciliation services, and providing drug information to healthcare professionals. So there were many activities that were performed by pharmacists, but most of these studies had not actually uh, spoken about the outcome of these actions. Okay, so because there are a number of activities that have been provided, but to actually quantify the kind of work that was done by the pharmacist, you have to have an outcome. So otherwise you cannot then justify the kind of work that you have done. So that's about hospital pharmacists and what they did during the COVID-19 era. Then comes the pharmaceutical manufacturer. And so Because of the COVID-19 outbreak, we realized then only how much dependent we are for our active pharmaceutical ingredient on China, because most of the drugs that were procured as raw materials were obtained from China. So there were a lot of supply chain disruptions, and there was also product exportation restrictions. And because they had lockdown in China from December 2019, there were a lot of manpower shortages in manufacturing plants, and thereby there were no bulk drug manufacturers. And in India, bulk drug manufacturers were not there um, in in large numbers. So then this task force was set up by the Indian government to review this internal active pharmaceutical in the ingredient sector, and their main job was to foster faster approvals of pharmaceutical infrastructure developments, and get clearance from the environmental industries for all these bulk drug manufacturers, provide any tax exemptions or subsidies for promoting indigenous pharmaceutical industry hubs. So they developed some strategies for promoting Indian active pharmaceutical industry production. So they gave some regulatory relaxations, especially if they were a API producer, and they ensured that there was a reliable supply chain management, and they also provided special economic zones for domestic pharma hubs, and they also gave some financing and tax relaxations if they had started off this. So in this way, the nation came forward and tried to promote more of, I mean, tried to decrease our dependency on other countries for our raw materials. So the responsibilities of manufacturing pharmacists in these kind of conditions would be to provide good quality drugs at affordable prices. So um, there are competitions between companies, and each company has a better pricing, and they say that our product is best. Okay, so it is important that they follow good manufacturing practices, and get good raw materials, and which comply to the Indian standards, Indian pharmacopoeia, and then uh, um, provide the drugs continuously. And also pharmaceutical manufacturers excuse me, need to invest in researching newer molecules, especially for managing these kind of infections like COVID and similar infections. And also they have to continuously ensure supply of medications, essential drugs, as well as those for chronic conditions. So, how can nations empower pharmacists to combat the COVID-19 pandemic? So, some pharmacy organizations have come forward and developed a joint policy recommendation to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll just mention a few of those recommendations that have been given by this organization. So, one is authorize, test, treat, and immunize for pharmacists. And you have to ease all the operational barriers and address both workforce as well as workflow issues. You have to address the shortages and continuity of care, and reimburse services provided by the pharmacist. So we'll take them one by one. So authorize, test, treat, and immunizes to you are allowing the pharmacist to order for a test, collect the specimen, perform the test, and interpret the test. Okay, so these are we are not asking for all tests, but only the most necessary tests, especially to combat during this COVID-19 period. And initiate treatment if necessary, because once the interpretation is available, and if the patient needs to be started immediately on an antibiotic or an antiviral, start the treatment for infectious diseases, especially for flu, strep throat, or COVID-19 positive patients. And also provide immunization authority to pharmacists, that is, give them the authority to give vaccinations. Okay, in United States, some states in the United States have given the pharmacists have the authority to provide immunizations or vaccines. But in our country, it's not yet there, and in fact, we have to educate our students also to give vaccinations, because that is going to be the next need of the hour, because we have to vaccinate some 1.3 billion people once the vaccines are made available, and there's going to be a serious shortage of people who are going to give the vaccines. And so if this is provided to pharmacists, they can help decrease the burden on the other healthcare professionals. And it is also important during this period, because of the kind of services that pharmacists have provided. We have understood that pharmacists can evaluate and manage the medications, especially for chronic diseases where you need to make dosage adjustments, and also authorize refilling of prescriptions, based on the pharmacist's judgment. So these kind of activities have been performed, and so this the pharmacist can be given the authorization to do these services, to provide these services for the better health of the community. And to ease operational barriers, I mean, there are some remote places where there are no hospitals, and maybe one or two pharmacies for the whole city or village. So you can allow pharmacists with valid licenses to operate across state lines. I mean, somebody from Karnataka actually counseling a patient in Andhra, or vice versa. So using these telehealth, and any perform any pharmacy task that can be performed remotely, like doing a medication review and giving your recommendations, or performing a medication reconciliation. So these kind of activities have been done during the lockdown period elsewhere, via telehealth, and that can be um, instituted here in our country also. And also ensure freedom of movement for pharmacists during lockdowns, especially to deliver prescription medications, and also provide continuing education to pharmacists, because they also need to be up to date in all the therapies, as well as in regulatory changes that keep happening from time to time, especially during these conditions. And to address shortages and continuity of care, you have to allow the pharmacist to give a substitute when a shortage has risen. And also, you should make it mandatory you should make it a mandatory requirement for manufacturers to provide information on why there is a shortage of a particular medication, and for how long is this shortage going to be. And also, you should allow the manufacturer to give this information to the public, so the public also can be prepared. And also, manufacturers should be required to conduct some periodic risk assessments of their supply chains, and they have to establish contingency plans to maintain that supply of a drug in the event that there is a manufacturing disruption. So, and also, allowing for strict pricing laws and all for drugs as well as other consumables will prevent third party persons from entering the market and rising the prices, and trying to make money out of such situations. And finally, reimburse the pharmacist for his services. So you can expand access to healthcare for all patients by allowing pharmacists to provide healthcare services and allow them to bill for their services. So the only I mean, most of the community pharmacists that we give continuing education programs for, they're all very open to providing any kind of services. But yeah, when it comes to measuring BP and measuring blood glucose levels, and it requires some time from their this thing, and also expenses from their pocket. So what they're asking is, can we be reimbursed for our services? I mean, I can provide it even if 100 patients come at my door. I can provide those services, but can I be given some kind of a reimbursement for that? And also, we have these medical insurance policies, and they have clearly stated that for this kind of for a heart attack, you have to have this much of money, that is, this much goes for the stent, this much goes for the surgery, and this thing. So a surgical component is there, a medication component is there, but there is no component for clinical pharmacy services. So in such cases, we would want insurance companies to include a clinical pharmacy service reimbursement in their policy itself. So this will come only when people like you and me, that is pharmacists, actively do a lot of studies which are again outcome based, and then show that after doing this we have reduced the cost, or we have reduced, or we have improved the efficacy of the drug, or those kind of studies which will allow insurance companies to include our services. Okay. And also, if a pharmacist has provided any telehealth services, you can allow them to bill for their services. So that's about some of the facilities or services that have been provided by pharmacists during this lockdown period. And I don't know, Raghav, do I have time, or should I wrap it up?
You can proceed, ma'am, actually.
Okay. So I'll just quickly tell about the COVID to infection life cycle. We already know that there are drugs like remdesivir, and they're already in practice. But because this virus uses the spike protein for entering, and it's also got a membrane protein as well as an envelope protein and a nucleocapsid protein, and it uses this spike protein and to enter into the host cell by using the ACE2 in the host cell. And this entry can happen either by endocytosis or by fusion. So if it happens by endocytosis, then in the endosomes, with the help of this furin enzyme, there can be an attachment here, and then with the help of cathepsin L, the viral RNA can start replicating. So there's fusion, and then there's release of viral genetic material. If it is by fusion, then it happens with the help of this TMPRSS2, that is transmembrane protease serine, and this also requires ACE2. And once that happens, viral RNA replication and protein synthesis, maturation, and assembly will happen. So, most of the therapies that are in clinical trials now are all trying to prevent this entry of the virus into the cells. So some of the potential anti-COVID-19 targeting therapies that are targeting the early events in the life cycle of SARS-CoV-2. One is the quinoline-based drugs. We know about chloroquine and other things, hydroxychloroquine. So they have been used, and again, some of the studies have showed negative results, not good results, and some have shown positive. And again, the dose is not exactly known. It was in vitro, it was observed in very mild, very low doses, but again in vivo, their trials have not shown any particular dose that is actually going to be effective against COVID 19. And also, this because it's a preventive kind of a drug, it's not really going to help if the patient has already having COVID. And then we have the RAS modifiers like ACE and the ACE inhibitors, as well as the ARBs, because the fusion requires the ACE2, and especially in the pulmonary, in the respiratory tract, the severity of the infection is more, and you find more of these ACE2 receptors in the respiratory tract. They are using these drugs, and they are in clinical trials right now. And then you have the HMG CoA reductase inhibitors like statins, also modifying the ACE, and they are also in clinical trials. And then you also have this transmembrane protease serine 2 inhibitors, so that the fusion is prevented. So these are all in the clinical trials, and they have shown some promises in clinical trials. They have proved to be promising. And umifenovir is again it's a non-nucleoside antiviral agent, and it has been shown that it can prevent infection with SARS and MERS, both of them. And we also know that in macrolides now has become a mm, norm of therapy. If a person who has COVID tested COVID positive will be put on azithromycin, and because it prevents the respiratory inflammation and other things, they have made it mandatory that patients get a macrolide if they are tested COVID positive. Then you have these drugs, ivermectin and niclosamide. They are actually anthelmintic drugs, and but it was shown that they also prevent the entry, that is the fusion. And they are now in clinical trials either with hydroxychloroquine or alone. Similarly, doxycycline also. And doxycycline will prevent the SARS, the virus from binding to the zinc based matrix metalloproteinases, and in that way they are preventing the entry of or multiplication of the virus. And chlorpromazine is basically an antipsychotic agent, but this also has shown some evidence that it can cause some endocytosis modification. It'll change the pH, and thereby it makes it unfavorable for the virus to get inside. And amiodarone and verapamil are the the calcium channel blockers. That is the non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers, and they block the calcium channels, and thereby they prevent uh, the entry of the virus. And tranexamic acid has been shown to prevent conversion of plasminogen to plasmin. And this plasmin is needed for that furin to act and the fusion to take place. So they are testing that with this drug. And then spironolactone, so we know that it is a drug which is used in heart failure, but it has got anti-androgenic activity. And because androgens are required for transcription of this TMP-RSS2, they are using this in clinical trials. And then isotretinoin and oseltamivir. So isotretinoin is also for regulation of ACE2, and oseltamivir, more than acting, preventing SARS-CoV-2 infection, it is actually preventing the other flus. Concomitantly, patients with COVID-19 have infection with other influenza and other kinds of flu. So oseltamivir can prevent those flus. And this DPP4 inhibitors, sitagliptin and linagliptin are also being tried for this. And then and the Janus kinase inhibitors. So all of these are some newer drugs which are actually still in the testing period, but which have shown initial promising these things. So these are my references, and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you so much for the information. And basing on what you have mentioned, that there has to be, I would like to ask a few questions before we wrap up. Is it okay, ma'am?
Sure.
So at some point of your presentation, you said that there has to be a proper quantification of all the activities that pharmacists provided during this period in order for us to get a most appropriate outcome, whether the services of pharmacists were really worth during this period or not. And you also mentioned that pharmacists should be given that free lands where they can renew the medications, where they can refill the prescriptions and all. So like how far can we able to implement that during this period, ma'am?
I mean, now it's not possible, but again, because if all of us pharmacists work together and come out with our experiences, uh, that will actually give the nation, I mean, when we put it all in paper and then we show that we have done all this, and I think that will be a impetus for the nation to take some kind of this thing. So during this pharmacy week, I mean, it is what we should discuss about, and what we should be doing further on. Maybe not immediately, but but when we put forward all these things, when they do a review of all the studies in India, then definitely they will find that data, and that's what. So what I'm telling is, if you have some kind of outcome studies, you put your data out there, and let the the authorities do the job.
Okay. So we do have some significant community pharmacies in our country which were providing the pharmaceutical care services more significantly than the remaining pharmacy stores that we have. So during this period, especially during the lockdown period, ma'am, do you think this period really showcased the need of the pharmacists as as an alternative healthcare provider, or you think that it further inhibited the services that are being offered by very few community pharmacies that wholeheartedly offer their pharmaceutical care services?
I mean, both. I mean, both were seen. We could see the drawbacks also, and we could see the opportunities also. And definitely, yes, the pharmacists were put in the forefront, and people have come to know the kind of work that a pharmacist can do during this period. Yes. But yeah, there are certain drawbacks. We are, by law, we are not required. I mean, we are not allowed to give vaccinations and, change the prescription and other things. So in that way, we felt that we were the thing. But wherever possible, pharmacists have really been proactive, and they have tried to come out. So I think both aspects are there, Raghav.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Because we do know that JSS Community Pharmacy is one which definitely offers a lot of pharmaceutical care services. So I just heard that there were some, because of this COVID period, the number of patients who visited that were a bit reduced. So I was
Yeah,
just,
it was more because of them not being allowed to go out of the house than anything else, you know.
okay,
So before, if you just had a headache, you used to run to the pharmacy, right? But now you learn to control the pain, you learn to bear the pain. So I do some home remedies and other stuff. So it's more because of that.
okay, ma'am. And lastly, I don't know whether this is relevant or not, but since even JSS Hospital is one site for the Covaxin trial, so any comment on that regarding the promising of the vaccine that's going?
I mean, no one who took the vaccine has got COVID infection. So I think that is good. So we finished Covaxin, and then they are actually going now for Sputnik, and then also the Bharat Biotech is also going to come next month. So I think it's promising. But again, it's too short. We only started in October. It's too less of a time for us to tell anything. We
Okay.
need to wait for another 6 to 8 months to actually see whether any of those people who got the vaccine actually developed COVID infection or not. But till now, no one has had any adverse effect or this thing apart from a mild fever from those who took the vaccine.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation and for your time. And I thank all the participants for being with us here today. And we'll see you all tomorrow at the same time, 3 p.m., with another speaker. Thank you all. Thank you.